Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in today. This is Beyond the Surface. Here, we aim to have God-centered conversations about different topics that students and young adults deal with. My name is Ryan, I'm the host of the podcast. Later today, I'm going to be joined by my co-host, Ezer. Today, Ezer and I are going to be joined by a special guest. Her name is Brittney, and together the three of us are going to take on the idea of being significant and being successful. We're going to ask the question, is there anything wrong with wanting to be successful? And we're going to talk a little bit about what we think it looks like to live a life of significance. I just want to preface this episode by saying this is a topic that's super challenging for me personally, and we definitely don't have all the answers, but we hope that you guys enjoy this conversation and get some benefit from what we have to say. So now, let's jump on into the conversation. All right, so today we're talking about success versus significance, and this idea kind of stemmed from back when I was in middle school. I heard I was a family friend, and he was talking to our youth group, and he said that being successful is adding value to your life, while being significant is adding value to others' lives. And this is something that's kind of stuck with me ever since that time, and I think it's a really cool idea and a unique idea to talk about. And as I'm going through Proverbs right now, I feel like Proverbs speaks to this quite a lot. So a couple of the Proverbs that I was reading in preparation for this that stood out to me is Proverbs 16:8, which says, "Better is little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice." And then another one is Proverbs 11:4. It says, "Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death." So when you hear about someone being successful, what do you typically think of? We can have Brittney start this one off.
Yeah. So I think it's really easy to think about success in like a worldly mindset. So you think of your income, you think of, like the picture perfect family or the happy relationship. And I feel like when you picture success, it's like all the good things in people's lives. And so you see them kind of, succeeding at work, at home, and just in they're traveling, they're having all these opportunities, their life just seems perfect and seems fun, and that there's no battles or issues that they're facing. What about you, Ezer?
Yeah, success, just coming from a worldly perspective, the first things that just come to my mind, they have a family, they have kids, they're married, their kids are all doing well, their family's not split up or anything, they're all doing well. The fitness, they have a great body. They go to the gym. They're good eating habits. It's all part of the routine. And then of course money. They have a steady income, a property which they call home. More than enough to live on. They go on vacations and everything. And that's what I think about like success from a worldly perspective. But when we start, and I know we'll get into significance, but like significance, I feel like is influence. And I feel like success without significance is kind of dead. Influence, you have influence in any sphere of your life, whether it be at work, with your friend group, honestly, even social media. Like, is your life influencing the decision making of another? Is your life actually having a change? Is it being a light to somebody else?
Yeah, definitely. When I hear the word success or think about somebody that's successful, the first place I go is athletes, because I played sports in college and I wanted to be a professional athlete for so long. And I feel like a lot of times like motivational videos and stuff like that often feature athletes and these people that are at the very peak. Outside of that, I would say also just having a lot of money and kind of the status symbols that you typically think of, the nice car, the big house, the pretty wife or the handsome husband, like that whole thing. I would say that's typically what comes to my mind. Just kind of like the worldly projections of success is what that word usually sparks. And there's not anything necessarily wrong with wanting to be successful. I like kind of what Brittney was hitting at here. So Brittney, why don't you kick us off with that? Is there anything wrong with wanting to be successful?
Yeah. I don't think that there is anything wrong with like desiring success or striving for success. I do believe that the Lord needs his people in leadership positions. He needs his people that are going to be successful, that, are going to use the talents he's given them, the passions, the opportunities, the financial blessing. Like they're going to use all those things that he's equipped them with to truly impact others. And so, and I think something that when I was preparing for this that really stuck out to me was like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful as long as our heart's in the right place. So if we come at it from a place of, selfish ambition or selfish desires or greed, that's kind of when we lose like ourselves in the process. But when you come at it from a place of like, I'm going to use what's been given to me to impact others and to make like this workplace better, or to make my employees' lives better, the people around me better, that's when I think that we truly do succeed.
Yeah, I love that. I think, just short answer wise, like no, like there's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful, with having that God-given desire. God's will is for us to succeed in everything we do. He's written that he wants us to prosper and have good health. John writes in 3 John, beloved, I pray above all things that you prosper and be in good health, just as your soul prospers. So to desire success isn't a bad thing. I think it's to a certain extent a God-given desire. And like Brittney was saying, it's hard to have influence when we are not successful in anything that we do. It's hard for us it's hard for us to have an influence or to impact somebody else when we ourselves are not growing or are not changing in our lives or are not succeeding in everything we do. I hear these Christians are like, oh, Christians aren't supposed to be rich. Christians shouldn't be pursuing high income positions. They should be servants. And, I get that, but, they say that things like, if you have a lot of money and if you have a lot of fame, then you're tempted to fall into sin. But man, if God has called you to a certain position, if God has called you to a certain sphere of life, whether it be, that you're wealthy and that you're with a lot of other wealthy people or whatnot, like he's going to give you the grace for it. God writes that my grace is sufficient for you and is more than enough for you. So man, so to desire or to think that success and that fame is going to lead to sin, that's really just that's not what God promises. God promises that his grace is more than enough for you and that he's going to be all you need and wherever he calls you to be.
Yeah, I think that's very wise. In Proverbs, as we were talking about money a little bit, we listed money as one of the staple ways that kind of people view success. Proverbs talks all about how we can accumulate wealth and that we should work hard and we should build our wealth slowly. But it also talks about how to do that, making sure that we're not exposing other people or we're being greedy or we're doing things like that. We want to be humble as we do it. We want to work hard. We want to earn honest wages, basically. In the book that I'm reading right now, Kingdom Man, there was a whole chapter basically talking about how men desire to be great. And Tony Evans, the author of the book, I think says it really well. He says, greatness is maximizing your potential for the glory of God and the good of others. And then he goes on to talk about how the Apostle Paul urged the church in Corinthians to try to be great in everything that they do. It says, seek greatness in all that you do, to be done to glorify God. So basically, like Paul is saying that as long as Brittney said, our heart posture is in the right place, if we're doing it to impact others and glorify God through it, then we want to do it to the best of our ability. And we shouldn't necessarily be chasing the success, just the money, just the status. We should be chasing after God and after the desires that he puts in our heart. And we should be seeking to help others through those desires that he puts in our heart, and then trust that God is going to add those things on to us later. And I also just want to throw out there too that sometimes success and like our rewards are not always going to come here on the earth. We may not see immediate gratification for some of the things that we do here on earth. We'll be rewarded later in heaven, and ultimately, like that's the goal. That's where we want our rewards anyways. I mentioned in a previous episode on this podcast, like I really want to live in a way that I can hear the words, well done, my good and faithful servant. And I think like if that's ultimately what we're chasing, then having success added to us, as long as our heart's in the right place is okay. There's nothing wrong with it for sure. So Ezra, what do we mean when we say living a life of significance?
So I was saying that significance is influence. But I'm going to even take it a step further. I think it means memorable. To live a life of significance means that your life is memorable. It's not forgotten. I think about Jesus. Jesus, I think, is not, he's not only our Lord and Savior, but I think he's one of the greatest leaders in the history of the earth. He is the single most influential person this earth has ever seen. Like whether you're a believer or not, I recommend studying the life of Jesus and how he communicated, how he lived his life. That is true like leadership. But he only lived 33 years. And yet he's he was actually really only in ministry for 3 years. He was only doing his thing for 3 years of his life. And yet he is the most memorable, most influential person this earth has ever seen. We're still talking about him to this day. I think about this young guy at our church. He passed away, I think, like it's about 2 years now. But he was part of our youth ministry and just a really, really kind and influential. He worked with our kids as well. And, just his love for the Lord and his love for our pastors and for each other. We're still talking about him to this day. But we're talking about just the life that he lived and his kindness for others and just the impact that he had on our church and in our community, on all of us. We're still talking about him to this day. So significance, it means, you're not going to be forgotten. You're not just going to be here and then, move on and people are going to forget about you, but you're memorable. You had an impact. You had influence.
Yeah. And I think with who you're talking about too, one of the things that really stood out to me is just, he was always willing and always available to help people, or if you ever need anything or you ever wanted to hang out, he was always willing to make time to spend time with you, to pour into you. He was always present when you were spending time with him. He remembered things that you told him. So you could just tell that he was invested in other people. And I think that was one of the most influential things about him, is just like he really did care about people, and his actions reflected that.
Absolutely. And I don't necessarily mean that you have to die early in order to be memorable. But the question is, if you were to die today, would people remember you, or would they forget about you? Don't think about that too much, but I don't know. It is something to really think about, though. Like, if you were to die today, are you really gonna leave? Are there going to be shoes to be filled?
Yeah, and on that, here's the other thing too. Like, what if Jesus was to come back today? Like, did you make an impact in others' lives to where, they had an opportunity to get closer to him, or maybe to know him if they didn't already, because of the way that you lived your life?
That's good.
If Jesus comes back to establish his kingdom on earth, are you going to be somebody that was a good steward of the things that Jesus gave you while you were here, so Jesus can trust you with more in his kingdom? Or, did we kind of just waste time here?
Yeah. I think that 3 words that come to mind as you guys are talking was intentionality, influence, and impact. And I think that those 3 words sum up like living a significant life. Like, what impact are you having on people? How are you being intentional in their lives? And how are you influencing, the people around you for the kingdom of God and for God's call on their life? And I was listening to a message the other day, and the pastor was just kind of talking about how like life always seems greener on the other side. And in actuality, the grass is green where we choose to water it. And so I feel like the Lord was really like, hey, what is in your hand? What is around you? Who are the people in your circle that you can truly, water, that you can invest in, that you can, have conversations with about the Lord, about where they're at in life, just support them. And, when we can leave people better off than when we first met them, I think that that's truly significant. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's just little things. Like I said, remembering the conversations that you had with people shows that you care. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to donate a ton of money or speak on a pulpit every Sunday.
That's good.
Have this influence and have this reach. God places all of us where we are and puts us in the seasons that we're in for a reason. And I think that it's important to view it that way, and to view that we have purpose in every single season, so that we can try to impact people each and every day, and we can live our lives in a way that people can see Christ reflected through us. So I think that that's most important, is just heart posture and making sure that each and every day we remember that we're where we're at for a reason, and there's people that we can influence today, even if it's just taking time out of your day to have a conversation with somebody on the bus on your way to work, or talking to a coworker a little bit and going a little bit deeper with your conversation than you normally would with them.
I love that. And I love how you said that, it doesn't take, being a generous donor, to some foundation, or it doesn't take you speaking with a microphone. And it's little things, just little conversations. The biggest impacts I've had on me are just conversations I've had with people in the car or something, or just, text messages, conversations. I'm telling you right now, more than ever, it does not take much to encourage somebody, and just to send them a message to say, hey, how's it going? And that's going to impact them. That's really going to encourage them.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ezra, who's somebody that's had a personal impact on you and kind of changed you, and somebody that you would say was significant in your life?
Whenever I get asked this question, the same two people come to my mind over and over and over again. And the funny thing is that I only knew them. I was only really with them for like 3 years or so. On and off. I kind of know them, but now they actually live across the globe now, and they're doing Bible school elsewhere. But at the time, they were our church's youth pastors when I was in high school. And their teachings still lie in my heart to this day. They've literally shaped me into the person I am. But it wasn't just like, what they were just saying with the microphone in front of the whole group, but it's the conversations that we had alone. It's the conversations that we had after service, just one-on-one, or at special events, or in a car, that really sharpened me. And the thing that I admire most about them is their ability to communicate and to influence in a short amount of time. Because, like when you're the children of the senior pastors, which they were, you don't have a lot of time on your hands. You got busy schedules. You're working on all sorts of different projects. If you got a chance to meet with them one-on-one, you were lucky, and it would maybe only be for like a half an hour lunch break. But even in that, they had the ability to take to put a 3-hour worth conversation in just a half an hour lunch break. They could give you a 10-minute word of encouragement in just a 2-minute walk to the office. And I don't mean that they talked fast. I mean that they chose their words really carefully. They weren't like, oh, I wish I had more time, but they made the most of every second. And to this day, they are still my favorite leaders I've ever gotten to know and I've ever had the honor of working with. What about you, Brittney?
Yeah, the first person that comes to my mind is definitely my mom. She is someone that is just so selfless, and she started a nonprofit organization from the ground up. She holds leadership positions within the church and at work. And, all of those things are great. And watching her walk out what the Lord has called her to do has been something so beautiful. But I think the reason why she is the most impactful person in my life is that I have seen her behind closed doors walk through some really tough situations, walk through victories, walk through valleys, and she consistently turns to the Lord. Like, she embodies what that woman of God is supposed to look like. She's someone that no matter the inconvenience, she will drop anything and everything to make sure that you're listened to, you're encouraged, you're prayed for. She's just someone that truly looks to others first before herself. And to be able to see that firsthand has just really impacted the way that I want to love and serve others, simply from watching how well she does it.
Brittney, your mom is amazing.
I agree.
Yeah, your mom has been a huge blessing to me too. So that's cool. It's a good one for sure.
How about you, Ryan?
Mine's similar to Ezra. So this was back, it wasn't when I was in high school so much that he was my youth pastor. He was my youth pastor at the church that I grew up in through middle school and a little bit my freshman year. But then he ended up moving. But I still stay in contact with him. We send text messages and have phone calls. He came to see me play ball while I was in college. But he was just a mentor to me. He would take time out of his day and we'd go get lunch together. I'd meet with him in my office. He helped me walk through some difficult seasons of my life when I was younger. He helped me overcome some different things that I was dealing with. And he really helped to shape me into the person that I am today, just in how diligent he was at sharing God with me and always looking to God through his circumstances that he was dealing with and the different career changes and whatnot that he's had. He was just always really solid. And like I said, he just took the time to spend with me. So that was really, really influential to me, just that when I was younger, somebody took time to work with me in some of the areas that I was struggling and help me with some of the situations that were difficult and whatnot. And so he just made a really big impact through, I guess, his time and his intentionality, as we were talking about earlier. So he definitely is near and dear to my heart. So when we're striving to live a life of significance, what kind of impact do you guys want to have on other people? You can go ahead, and Brittney, you can start this one.
Okay. Well, I think I mentioned earlier, I want to leave people better off than when I first met them. And working in the medical field the past 2 years, working firsthand with patients, like that's my goal when I walk into work every single day, is that, I want them to not only leave the hospital physically better, but emotionally, mentally and spiritually. Like I want to be someone that truly invests in others. I want to be someone that's consistent, encouraging, joyful, faithful, and intentional. And, as we prep for this, I was like really pondering, like how do I sum up like what kind of impact I want to have? And it's kind of cliche to say, but like I truly want my life to be a testimony to how good God is, no matter what circumstance I'm walking through in life, whether good or bad. Like I want to still praise God in the valleys as much as I praise him on the mountaintops.
That's so good, Brittney. Brittney, if you don't mind me asking, when you're in the hospital, when you're at work, what are some things that you do practically that again leave people better off than when they first came in? What are some things that you do that are above and beyond that aren't really part of your job description?
Yeah, I think the first thing that came to mind when you asked that is just simply sitting with patients. A hospital can be really, really busy, and my days are always jam-packed full of, medication administration times and different procedures and just kind of everything that comes along with working in a hospital. But I think taking like time and setting aside to just sit at the bedside with the patient and truly talk about, not their physical condition, but, life, like what has made them who they are today, like how did they get here? What's their life like outside of this? How does what they're going through impact them? And I think just taking that time to like sit at their level and just be like, hey, like, how's your heart doing? Like I know your physical condition, but how's your mental state? How's your emotions doing? And I feel like that's something that can really be taken for granted when you're super busy.
I love that. And I think just by doing that, just by sitting down and just talking with them, taking an extra moment, even when you have better things to do, even when you supposedly could be doing something else or helping somebody else, by talking with them, you're being remembered. You're living a life that is to be remembered. In that one time when they were in the hospital, they're always going to remember, at their lowest point in their life, there was somebody, there was a believer that came and just listened. They weren't just trying to be religious or anything. They were just listening.
Mm-hmm.
And man, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, sometimes all people need is a little encouragement. Yeah. And it's crazy how many people do not take that time to just say like a single word of encouragement or, to celebrate that milestone that person has got to. And just being intentional about, hey, like, I see that you're improving. I see what you're doing. I see, the little things. That's so important.
Speaking of the little things, one of the things too that I have found that actually makes a really big difference in people's lives is when you remember their names.
Yeah.
I was really bad about this. I would have conversations with people at school that I didn't really know, and I would introduce myself, and then I would run into them again later, and they would remember my name, but I wouldn't remember their name. And I always felt super bad about that. And I did like when other people remembered my name. So that was something that I decided I was going to be intentional about, was remembering people's names. So my last year of school, anytime I met somebody new and I introduced myself, as soon as the conversation was over, I'd get out my notes on my phone and I'd type their name out and then something that was memorable about them. And then that way, the next time that I came in contact with them, I was more likely to remember them. And this past summer when I was working at the hospital, I was known as the guy who knows everybody's names.
Wow.
And I had
a testimony.
I had somebody who told me that it actually made a big difference, that every time I walked into an OR, I called the resident by their name instead of just saying, hey, what do you need?
That's so good. Man, that's so neat that you would take a moment to write it down.
Yeah, like I said, I felt bad. It was just something I liked when other people remembered my name. but I was really poor about doing it. So after every conversation, when I meet somebody new, I get out my phone and write their name down and something unique about them. And it's helped me a lot. So.
And I think that's one of the best qualities of a leader. Man, if you want to be a leader in any sphere of influence, if you want to be, some type of coach or a teacher or like some lead boss in a company, man, my boss, he remembers all of our names. And I'm just like, wait, we've only because, I work at a community college and they're in an office. They're one of the deans actually. And we only basically interviewed with them one time. And then, we're off to go to our labs and we meet with them like twice a year. And yet they remember all of our names. Lab technicians that are so far from their position, they remember all of our first and last names. I'm like, wow, that's how it's done.
Yeah, it gives importance to that person. Like, not just another face. You're not another person. Like, you have importance in my life and you have purpose. And I think that's really cool that you are intentional about doing that.
Definitely. So what about you, Ezer? What is the kind of impact that you want to have on others, and how do you want to be remembered?
Yeah, I want to be remembered for the better. Mm-hmm. It's so much easier to remember the bad than the good. You could be having just a totally great day. Everything is perfect, but one small little bad thing, that's all you're thinking about the rest of the day. Your whole day is soiled because of that. But man, I want to be so freaking kind and thoughtful. Nobody will ever forget it. And it comes out of an overflow. I'm not just like forcing it. It comes out just an overflow of how kind and thoughtful the Lord has been to me. Jesus commands us to love one another. And through this, the world will know that we are his disciples. Now, we don't use the world's perception as our gauge, but it's a good question to ask. What does the world think of you? Are you the type of person that goes above and beyond, sits at the hospital bed and listens to them? Are you a listener? Are you rude? Are you a short-tempered person until you get morning coffee or something like that? Are you the first person to pay for the meal? Are you always looking for ways to serve and to be kind and to help out? Are you the first one to go and help the dishes or something like that? Do you care if you get anything else in return? Are you a stuck-up religious person who's not going to hang out with anyone else besides believers because you don't want to soil yourself and you don't want to, hurt your faith or something like that? Man, I would, I'm not even sure if this is even right or not, but I would dare say that what the world says of you is equally as important as what the church or your family says of you. Man, how is the world thinking of you? Because they're the ones who you're here to serve and whom you're here to influence and to bring to Jesus.
No, that's really good. I like what you said about, are we stuck up as religious people? Paul in Thessalonians tells the church of Thessalonica that they should be respected by everybody, that they should seek to win the favor of men so that they can have influence and they can have reach in men. If we view ourselves as better than other people because we're believers, then we're not going to reach people that need to be reached, and we're not any better than anybody else. That's not what it is at all. And so I don't want to come off that way, and I'm glad that you took the time to point that out, because I think sometimes as Christians, and sometimes there's just a stigma around the church that, we think that we're better than everybody else, or we're hypocritical or whatever. We're all sinners and we all have our struggles that we go through. We all have temptations that we struggle with and whatnot. So yeah, it's important to keep that in mind and make sure that we're treating everybody the same.
Absolutely. Brittney, can I ask you this? What do you think the world should see, coming from a world's perception? They're unbelievers. They don't know much about Jesus, but they know us. What do you think they should see out of us? What do you think they should see out of you?
Yeah, I think that service, we're called to be servants. I mean, Jesus came in and died on the cross for our sins and, is the Prince of Peace and everything we could ever imagine, yet he was washing people's feet. And so I think that we're called to live a life of service. We're called to live a life of love and just kindness and joy. And we're supposed to be like that light in the darkness. So in a world that is not very bright and that is full of depression and full of, hurt and different pains and death, and we're called to be the complete opposite of that and to kind of mimic what Jesus was here to the best of our ability, of course. And so I think that if they can kind of see that those qualities that Jesus had in us, that should be our goal each and every day.
Love that. Yeah, that's super, super good. I think kindness is just one of the most overlooked things, honestly. I think being kind is something that can go so far. Mm-hmm. I've shared this before too, but in a sphere of college guys are not very uplifting to each other. It's a very rare thing to see happen. So I think especially when you're one-on-one with somebody, to just take the time and say, hey, I do care about you, and I see what you're doing in this area of your life, and I think that it's really cool. Or I've seen growth in this area of your life. I think that's awesome. That can speak volumes, or going out of your way to maybe buy somebody's coffee or, whatever. It makes a really big difference, and it shines our light really well. So it just, the little things are important.
Mm-hmm. As you were talking, I was just kind of thinking about the term vulnerability. And I think that we as Christians need to be vulnerable. I mean, we as humans need to be vulnerable just with what we're going through and, how we're relying on the Lord. And I think when we open up and we allow people into our struggles and our victories, it gives them the freedom to do the same thing. And so if we can be vulnerable with people and just allow them the freedom to be exactly who they are, but still love them through it, and try to make each other better, I think that's also really important.
Yeah, that's really good too.
I do have one final question for Brittney. Brittney, what advice do you have for the next Beyond the Surface guest?
Ooh, I like this question.
Ooh, I think just to relax a little. One, just be reminded that it's an audience of one. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're solely trying to explain your heart and to explain, what you've learned throughout your walk with the Lord. And I think that preparing for this, I really was praying that the Lord would just use my words to get across, his will and what he wanted to be said. And I think when you take that pressure off yourself and you go, okay, God, this is you, this isn't me, I'm doing this to honor you and you alone. And so when you're only trying to please him, there's no letdown, I guess, is what I would say. So just not to be too worried about the little things and let it go and just share your heart.
Love that.
Yeah, that's good. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. We hope that you enjoyed the episode today. If you did, feel free to subscribe to us on iTunes or YouTube, or follow us on Spotify so that you don't miss out on our weekly episodes. Also, Ezra and I would really appreciate it if you would share this with anybody that you think may enjoy this podcast or benefit from the conversation. Lastly, Ezra and I would love to connect with you, so if you have comments, feedback, or questions for us, we've got our email linked in the description, so we would love for you to shoot those our way. Or if you're listening by way of YouTube, go ahead and comment down below. Ezra and I hope that you all have a great week as you go and love God and love people.